Well, good morning or good afternoon, everyone. I'm so glad you're here. It's going to be Thanksgiving season, or it is Thanksgiving season. It's not going to be, it is Thanksgiving season. So I thought we would open up our conversation today on just what are we thankful for? What are you thankful for? One thing. I know it's hard for some of you to be thankful for anything, but the Bible says in everything, give thanks. Not for everything, for sure. We can't give thanks for everything, but in everything, give thanks. And so I'd like to open up our time because we're going to be talking about sacrificing. And Thanksgiving is a time of sacrifice for most moms and most women. We sacrifice, we make meal, we cook, we do all kinds of things. We often clean the whole thing up. We prepare, we plan, we try to make a wonderful holiday for our family if you're able. And so what's one thing you are thankful for? I'm thankful for my kids and my health. Yeah, I've been practicing a gratitude journal for the last 2 years now, every day. I write down 10 things that I'm thankful for. And I think it's really helpful to focus on that because sometimes life is hard and it's full of trials and hardships. And sometimes we can get ourselves all caught up in what's wrong with life and we forget to look for the flowers and we forget to look at the sunshine and the beauty outside and just small little things that God has given us as gifts every single day to help us endure the hard. And so for me, practicing that gratitude journal and just remembering every day 10 things, what are 10 things that I'm grateful for, has really shifted my perspective a lot on different things. And so I would encourage you in this season of Thanksgiving that you would focus on what can I be thankful for? I'm thankful that God is stable and solid always. Me too. Me too. When our world is falling apart, we can't trust our leaders. We can't trust certain people. We're on the verge of nuclear war. I am so glad that there is a God who knows what's happening and that he is stable and consistent and totally trustworthy for sure. Yeah, I thank you for my community that they've stepped up and really care. Thank for Conquer, for kittens. I'm thankful for kittens. I love kittens. I love little animals. Did I tell you my bunny story? So about I walk every day. I try to walk about 5 miles every day. We are going to get to our topic, but let me just tell you my bunny story. So I walk about 5 miles every day, and I was walking down the street, and I saw this little dead bunny on the curb. It was on the street side of the curb, and it was just laying there, and I felt so bad for it. And I looked at it, and I just said a little prayer, and then I kept walking. And then on my way back, I looked at the bunny and the bunny looked at me. The bunny wasn't dead. It picked itself up and it looked at me like, help me, help me. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what do I do? This is a wild bunny. And it's been hit by a golf cart or a bicycle. It wasn't bleeding. And so I didn't know what to do, but I knew I couldn't just leave it there. So I picked it up. Thank God it didn't bite me. And I carried it for 2 miles home. Then I put it in a little cardboard box and I called the wildlife sanctuary where they had vets on call 24 hours. And my neighbor and I drove him to the sanctuary about an hour away, and they took him and said that if he were fixable, they would fix him. And if he wasn't fixable, they would euthanize him. But at least he didn't die in the hot sun, eaten by a coyote. But yes, I'm thankful for little bunnies, and I'm thankful for God caring for little bunnies, that he let me see that bunny, that I could help it not suffer any longer than it was going to suffer. Yeah, thankful for all kinds of things. Thankful that I'm getting to spend time with my mom and sister. So grateful. Sunrises and sunsets, the beauties of the colors painted in the sky. Every day they're there. Every day they're there. And most of the time, we don't even notice. So today we're going to be talking about sacrifice. A couple of days ago, we talked about suffering and what is how can we get formative suffering? How can we allow suffering to teach us and to grow us? And what happens when we are foolish and we get into unnecessary suffering, or we're resisting our suffering lessons and we become deformed by that? So if you didn't watch that on suffering, because I think there's a lot of wrong spiritual teaching on sacrifice and suffering, especially towards women. I don't know why. We're supposed to be the extra heroic sacrificers, but I think there's a lot of wrong spiritual teaching. So let me be clear. Let me just turn off my computer before it dings us to death. Let me be clear that sacrifice and suffering are noble virtues in the Bible. Jesus tells us that. But it's really important that we understand when we're to suffer or sacrifice, because that's usually when we sacrifice, that's a willing choice, right? Suffering isn't always a willing choice. Sometimes someone just grabs us and hurts us, and we don't have that choice of whether we're going to suffer or not. But usually sacrificial work is a choice. You get to decide, am I going to go out of my way or give up something I need or want, or give up my money or give up my energy or give up my time or even give up my life? Jesus says in John, there's no greater noble sacrifice than you would actually give up your life for a friend. And so sacrifice is usually a choice that we make. But I think as women, sometimes we think we should sacrifice when we're doing it out of fear. We're doing it out of fear. We're not doing it out of love. We're sacrificing me so that you don't get mad at me. We're doing what you want so that we can get along. And we're not necessarily doing it for your good. We're doing it to keep the peace. We're doing it to stop the arguing. And sometimes that might be a noble sacrifice so that littles don't have to watch an argument between two grown-ups that is not healthy. But let's differentiate. So I want you to think about, what are some other examples of a noble sacrifice? What are some? So we're gonna make a little list. I'll write things down as I see them in the chat. I'm all by myself today, so I may not catch everything. But I think Karen, I think you're helping me. You write down what you think is a noble sacrifice, and Karen will put that in a list. And what's a foolish sacrifice? What's a noble sacrifice as a woman? For your family, for your neighbor, for your parents? What are some noble sacrifices that we do? And usually we do this for others, right? So give me a list of a noble, give me an example of a noble sacrifice. Here's one. I think a noble sacrifice is staying up with a sick baby or a sick child, right? That's a noble sacrifice. You're giving up something you need, which is sleep, to take care of someone who can't take care of themselves. Right? That's a noble sacrifice. What's another noble sacrifice? All right, giving your time, helping the community. Right? Giving up some of your extra clothes, maybe some of the nicer clothes that you have that you don't need anymore, but you kind of hate to give away because you spend so much money on them. Give them away to someone else who could really use them. Stay-at-home mom could be a noble sacrifice. Right? That you have some children and they have needs that you need to meet, and you're choosing to put away your career for a season and stay at home and take care of those kiddos. Right? What's another? Taking on a second job because my husband is hurt and cannot work right now. Driving a neighbor to a doctor's appointment. Tithing. Yeah. These are all good, noble sacrifices. All right. So now let's talk about foolish sacrifices. What are some foolish sacrifices that we do? What are some foolish sacrifices that we do? Anybody have an idea about that? The Bible talks about one. Let me read it to you. The Bible talked about a couple, so we'll talk about them in the Bible, because the Bible does talk about foolish sacrifices, and it doesn't necessarily talk about them in those words, but here's what it says. My child, this is in Proverbs chapter 6. My child, if you have put up security for a friend's debt, or agreed to guarantee the debt of a stranger, if you have trapped yourself by your agreement and you're caught by what you said, follow my advice and save yourself, for you have placed yourself at your friend's mercy. Now swallow your pride and go and beg to have your name erased. Don't put it off. Do it now. Don't rest till you do. Save yourself like a gazelle escaping from a hunter, like a bird fleeting from a net. In other words, if you've promised someone money that you shouldn't have promised, that you are willing to sacrifice your rent so that you can pay their rent, you're willing to sacrifice your retirement so that your kids can buy a new house, stop that foolishness. Stop that foolishness. All right? That's not a noble sacrifice to give to someone who should be taking care of themselves. Right? To give to someone who should be taking care of themselves and can, but just isn't. All right. So it's one thing to help a disabled parent who doesn't have any income. It's another thing to help a parent who spent foolishly and doesn't have money for things, and you come in and rescue them. That's a foolish sacrifice. Enabling an alcoholic or addict at your children's expense. Foolish sacrifice. Foolish sacrifice. Making myself small and staying quiet in order to keep the peace. Foolish sacrifice. Now, there may be some wisdom in the moment, but overall, yes, it's a foolish sacrifice. For you to lose yourself in order to enable someone else's selfishness. And this is often what is the implied result of the headship teaching that we've been given as women. You are just to be a yes woman in your marriage, and he gets to do whatever he wants, even if it harms the family. That's foolishness. That's not your role as a good wife. Right? I'm not calling up to argue and fight with your husband about every little thing, but sometimes if you see your husband foolishly driving the family straight off the financial cliff and you just sit there passively, that's a foolish sacrifice. Right? It's a foolish sacrifice, the same as it would be if you see him driving recklessly and you keep getting in the car with him. It's a foolish sacrifice. God's not asking you to trust a foolish man, even if he's your husband. Yeah, if you rescue an angry man, you will have to do it again and again. I sacrificed 1/2 my life with an unsafe person. All right, let me read another foolish that they didn't do a foolish sacrifice in the Bible. And we often, let's see if I can find this one. All right, so how many of you have read the story of the 10 virgins and you scratched your head and you said, these girls weren't very nice, yet Jesus commends them. So let's read this one. Matthew 25. The kingdom is like 10 bridesmaids who took their lamps and went to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish. 5 of them were wise. The 5 who were foolish didn't take enough olive oil for their lamps. But the other 5, these were women, other 5 were wise enough to take along extra oil. When the bridegroom was delayed, they all became drowsy and fell asleep because they're human. At midnight, they were aroused by the shout, "Look, the bridegroom is coming, come and meet him." All the bridesmaids got up and prepared their lamps. Then the 5 foolish ones asked the others, "Please give us some of your oil because our lamps are going out." What's a good Christian woman to do? Well, the others replied, "We don't have enough oil for all of us. Go to a shop and buy oil for yourself." But while they were gone to buy oil, the bridegroom came. And those who were ready went in with him to the marriage feast, and the door was locked. Later, when the other 5 bridesmaids returned, they stood outside calling, "Oh, Lord, Lord, open the door for us." But he called back and said, "I don't know you." What is this story saying to you? I mean, it's got lots of implications. But as a woman, wouldn't we be guilt-tripped either by ourselves or by the 5 who didn't have enough oil? How many of you would fall for the guilt trip and take your suitcases? Yeah, I need to give some oil. I'm being selfish, right? We would do that. At least I used to do that. I wouldn't do it now. But I would sacrifice my oil lamp in order to give her some, not because she didn't have the money to buy oil, because she didn't take the time to do what she needed to do to take care of herself. How many of you are guilty of the same thing? That is not a noble sacrifice. Yeah, I foolishly sacrificed my kids' safety with their father. Thanks, Tamara. Tamara raises her hand. Me. Yeah. So this is how we've been taught as Christian women. And we've lumped it all into, well, you just need to die to yourself. You just need to die to yourself. And then you'll be a good wife. Then you'll be a good mom. Then you won't be selfish anymore. Is it selfish? Were the 5 wise virgins selfish because they said no? Some of you are really wrestling with this because it's really hard for you to say no. But then you are sacrificing yourself often foolishly. And we did a Facebook Live a couple of days ago. What is your anger trying to tell you? Sometimes you get filled with resentment when you say yes, when you knew you should have said no. And that resentment is telling you that you need to make a change. People will always try to take more from you than you're willing to give. And if you don't have a no, then you're not able to be a generous giver. See, I want to be a generous person. I want to give as freely as God has given to me. But in order to do that, I have to have a good no. Because otherwise, people will take more from me than I have and more from me than I can give. But as women, we've been taught that that's noble. that's noble to keep giving and giving and giving. And then when you feel resentful, you feel guilty for feeling resentful. Instead of saying, whoo, what is my resentment trying to teach me? I just stepped over the line of wise giving, and I'm into foolishness now. I'm foolishly sacrificing my sleep because my husband wanted to watch a movie. That's foolish sacrifice. But if I don't watch a movie with him, he's going to be mad. Well, maybe he's going to be mad. He's going to have to learn. If he wants to watch a movie with you, he has to do it on a weekend or he has to do it earlier because you need 8 hours sleep in order to be the kind of mom or the worker that you need to be the next day. Right? So this is really important, ladies, that we learn healthy relationship skills. And one of the most healthy relationship skills that you can have is your freedom and ability to say no. Because if you don't know how to do that, and we're going to talk about this Monday in a Facebook Live after the holiday, you will never be able to discern whether someone is a true friend or they're just a taker friend. Because if you're a giver, people will attract takers. And if you don't know how to say no, you don't know whether you have a taker who's just using you or whether you have a true friend. Tough love is a greater sacrifice. Yeah. Tough love is, Lori, because sometimes you risk the ire of the other person or the disappointment of the other person. I've died to myself to the point of burnout. I'm learning healthy stewardship. Yes. So what does it mean spiritually to die to yourself? So it's just like we learned in the Bible. The Bible's not telling you to trust everyone. In Proverbs 25, it says, do not trust a foolish person. Do not. It's like chewing with a broken tooth or walking with a broken foot. It's not smart. So where is this notion that love trusts everybody? Love believes all things, including the truth, right? Love rejoices in the truth. And so when you see that someone's not trustworthy or someone is taking advantage of your kindness, don't close your eyes. You're meant to see that, so that you don't keep giving and giving and giving and enabling and enabling and enabling. I've said this before here. My friend Lisa Turker says it best. She says, do not sacrifice the best of who you are just to enable the worst in someone else. Now, we can understand this really clearly with our children, hopefully. Although I've met women who have been foolishly sacrificial with their children. That our children need a hard no sometimes, don't they? In order for them to mature and learn that you don't get what you want all the time just because you throw a fit. But if you're too afraid to say that hard no, or let's say your child's 2 years old and they're really tired and they're really hungry and they're throwing a royal fit. And in that royal fit, they start kicking and punching you. I hope as a mom, you say to them, hey, honey, I know you're really tired and you're really hungry, but hitting mommy is not allowed. We don't hit just because we're angry. I hope you have the strength to not sacrifice yourself to allow your 2-year-old to hit you because he's tired, because he's hungry. So then when he's 22 or 32 or 42 or 62, when he's tired and hungry, he can berate you because he hasn't learned from very young on that he doesn't get everything he wants when he wants all the time, and he needs to learn some self-control. He's never learned that because everyone's just enabled his selfish beater to keep going as if he's entitled to everything. So this is really important, ladies, that loving your husband or your children well means wanting the best for them. Wanting the best for them, and wanting the best for them isn't for them to turn into little selfish monsters. And so when you keep catering and keep sacrificing, and keep doing and keep losing yourself in order to enable their selfishness or their destructiveness, I hope you wouldn't give up your retirement money for your son to buy a Harley, or for him to take his trip around the world, or for him to even purchase a house. He's young. He can save that money. You need that money for you because he's probably not going to take you in when you need retirement money. And if he does, that may not be what you want. And so this is really important, ladies, that you understand, yes, God honors your noble sacrifice. And if my sister needed a kidney, I would give her one of my kidneys in a heartbeat. If my child needed something that that they really needed and I could help them and it wasn't enabling some irresponsibility on their part, we would do that. You would sacrifice. But for you to do it to enable their selfishness or their immaturity, even their immaturity, right? When we do too much for our children, when we're brushing their teeth when they're 10 years old, we're enabling their immaturity and we're sacrificing our time in order to take care of them when they should be taking care of themselves. Same for your husband. So this is a lot. This is a lot to take in, especially before you meet your family. But I think it's a really important spiritual lesson for us to ponder and for us to think about. When is your sacrifice noble? And when is your sacrifice done out of fear? That if I don't do it, if I say no, then what? So answer the question. If I say no, then what? I love that you love that God, what God is doing in your life, Leanne. That's such encouragement. Isn't that exciting to know that God is maturing us? And that God sometimes says no to us. We say, God, why aren't you fixing this? God, why aren't you helping me? Sometimes like our children say, Mom, why won't you help me do my math? And it's not because you don't know math. You know math. It's because you need to know math. And so you don't do your kids' math and you don't help them with their math when they need to figure it out. And sometimes, ladies, God doesn't come to our rescue because he's saying, girlfriend, you need to mature. You need to figure this out. Right? You need to get the muscles on. And this is formative suffering. You need to build those muscles of no. You need to build those muscles of boundaries. You need to build those muscles of self-stewardship so that you aren't burning yourself out at both ends, thinking that that's what God wants you to do. He doesn't. He doesn't. When you can sacrifice yourself to enable someone else to flourish in a good way, then see if that's wise to do. And it might be. But if you're sacrificing yourself to enable someone else's sin or foolishness, that's not a good mom. That's not a good wife. That's not a good friend, right? That's not a good friend. If I say no, they will be disappointed. Yeah. And so if they're disappointed, what does that mean? What does that mean? Here's where you have to do some work. Leanne says, I get screamed or told I have to pick up one of the things he does. I stopped doing my spouse's laundry. He told me, then you need to change your own oil on the enclave. I said, no, I will not. Okay, so sometimes we play tit for tat a little bit. And I think that it's important that we be wise on how we do this so that we don't light fire to our relationships. So if we need to make some real important changes, yeah, if I say no, then what? Great question to ask yourself. And if I'm afraid of something, so I'm afraid they're going to get angry, ask yourself. And if they get angry, what does that mean? I'm afraid they're going to be disappointed in me. And if they're disappointed, what does that mean? People were disappointed in Jesus. Mary and Martha were disappointed in Jesus that he didn't come heal Lazarus, right? People are going to be disappointed in you. That's just life. You're not Superman. You can't do everything everybody wants all the time. But if you can't handle their disappointment, then maybe this is your lesson to learn. I need to learn to handle people's disappointment without feeling guilty, like it's my fault to keep everybody happy or my job to keep all the plates spinning. People are going to be disappointed when I can't meet all of their needs, right? And maybe that's okay. Like maybe everyone won't die if someone's disappointed, right? Here's what you do when someone's disappointed. So I had to disappoint my stepmom many years ago. And I'll show you with you how I did it. This is how you disappoint someone and say no, right? So every Christmas we did Christmas together, and my, our family still does it. They live in Chicago. I lived in Michigan. It was easy to do at that time. Then we moved to Pennsylvania. So we drove through the stormy roads the first Christmas and went home. The second Christmas we decided we weren't going to do that because we spent 8 hours on a icy road that was shut down until the snowplows could come. And we had 2 littles in the back seat and that was not pleasant. So I decided no more, we'll come in the summer, but we're not coming in for Christmas. And Of course, that was going to disappoint our entire family who was used to everybody coming in for Christmas, right? So when I had to drop the bomb and tell my stepmom and dad that we weren't coming in for Christmas, I imagined they would be disappointed, wouldn't you? If your whole family was coming in for Christmas and now they said they weren't, right? So I allowed her to have her disappointment. Of course, she's going to be disappointed. It's not my problem that she's disappointed, but I can certainly show empathy that she's disappointed. So I told her we weren't coming in and why. And she said, "Oh, I'm so disappointed." And I said, I know. It's so disappointing, isn't it, Mom? I didn't have to fix her disappointment. I didn't have to fix my disappointment. It's reality. It is a little disappointing, but I wasn't willing to do that anymore. And we both got over it. Right? So once you can be empathetic, yeah, I know. I'm sorry I can't do that for you. And I know it stinks. I know it's harder to do your math all by yourself. I know I can't give you that loan. I know that's really hard. It's hard to hear. I've always given you loans before, but I can't do it now. I've decided that I've got to be really a better steward of my finances or a better steward of my time. No, I can't do it. Yeah, I totally get that you're disappointed in me. And sit with it. Let someone be disappointed with you, but you're not disappointed with you. You made the right choice. See, you got a choice. If you give in, you're going to be disappointed with you. Like, I didn't want to do that. Now I did it. Or you're going to say no, and they're going to be disappointed with you. Disappointment is a normal part of someone saying no to you. Right? It's just true. And it's okay if you can stand it. And so this is your lesson in all of this. How do I learn to handle someone's disappointment? How do I learn to handle someone's anger? Here's a question. Can we consider divorce as a noble sacrifice for us to be safe? If you're in an abusive relationship, I wouldn't even call it a noble sacrifice. I would call it just wisdom. Wisdom that I'm giving up, yes, a marriage that's toxic and destructive in order to be spiritually, physically, financially, emotionally safe, sexually safe. I think that's wisdom. And it might be there's some pain in that of letting go of your dream of what you wanted it to be. But your safety and your stewardship are your first priorities, right? The prudent see danger and take refuge. When Jesus was in an unsafe situation, many times he left the situation. He didn't let himself get thrown off the cliff by the Pharisees who were seeking to harm him. The only time he made the noble sacrifice was for what? For our sins, to die on the cross. But he didn't make any foolish sacrifices. He didn't let people harm him who were trying to harm him. He got out of there, right? And so understand that unless you're Jesus and you're dying for someone's sin, no one's asking you to give up your life for them to harm you, and you just comply if you can help it, right? So sometimes, again, we suffer and it's not our fault. We get murdered, we get robbed, we get raped, and that's not our fault. We didn't sign up for that, and that's not what we agreed to. But when we're sacrificing, it's sort of like yes, I'm choosing to sacrifice for you. And is that noble, or is that done out of fear? Is it done out of love? I truly want to make you dinner and do this. Or maybe I don't want to make you dinner because I'm not loving to cook, but I care about you and I know you need to eat. And so I'm even willing to do something I don't like cook, in order to serve my family because I know this is a need for them. And I'm willing to give my time in a sacrificial way, right? That's a noble sacrifice versus being resentful doing it or feeling forced to do it. You get to decide. You get to decide what kind of person you want to be. And most of us, if we were surveying you, would say, I want to be a loving, caring, generous, giving person, which is all wonderful Christian qualities, good things. And I want to be those things. But if you don't have your no, and you don't have your ability to discern, when is this foolish to be generous? Okay, I want to be generous. But if someone who has a gambling problem asks me for money, or someone who's foolish with their money, spending it on gambling and now doesn't have money to pay the rent, I'm not giving them my money, right? I'm not giving them my money. And so it's interesting. I like to be generous to the homeless. And when I have the opportunity, I usually buy like gift cards that I'll give them, like McDonald's cards or Chick-fil-A cards or something in the car. But we were in Prescott this summer, and I was walking, and there was this man who was sitting, a young man. He was sitting on the corner, and he looked like a wreck. And I just went up to him and I said, "What do you need?" And he said, "I need a beer." I said, "Well, I'm not going to buy you a beer, but how about a bottle of water or a Coke or something?" He said, "Okay." And so I walked down the block, went to the store, got a bottle of water, got a donut there. They had donuts there, and got a donut, came back and gave it to him. And so I can do that, right? I'm not going to give him money to go buy drugs, right? So I think ways that you can be generous. I think he would have preferred the beer, but I could be generous in the way I want to be generous. Now, that wasn't sacrificial. It sacrificed my time a little bit, but it wasn't much. But what I'm saying is you get to decide the person you want to be, and you get to decide what you don't want to do, what you don't want to do. So if he had said to me, "Hey, will you buy me a car? Will you, take me home to your house?" I might have said, "No, I can't do that." So I think those are the ways that we are willing to sacrifice and willing to not sacrifice, because it might be stupid. It might not be wise to do that. And so I think these are things that we have to learn as grown-ups, grown-up women. I think sometimes we defer to other people to make our decisions. Like, what do you think I should do? And I'm not saying don't listen to people. You're here listening to me. But ultimately, being a grown-up means you get to decide the kind of person you want to be and the kind of person you don't want to be. And most of you do want to be kind, loving, generous women. I think that's wonderful. But if you don't have a no, you're going to get sucked dry. And so sacrificing is a good thing when it's done for someone's good. And it's a foolish thing when it only enables their destructive, foolish, sinful behavior to continue. So submitting to a foolish, destructive, sinful man isn't wise. Now, sometimes it's wise to comply, because if you don't comply, you're going to get hurt. If someone has a gun to my head, I'm going to comply. But I wouldn't call that biblical submission. I would call that wisdom complying with a fool until I can get out of there. All right, so I want to open this up to some questions. It might have sounded a little bit confusing biblically for you, and I want you to understand truly what God's heart is in this. God doesn't do something that he doesn't ask. Jesus didn't do something he doesn't ask us to do, and he fled danger. He didn't let someone harm him. And you don't need to do that either. You don't need to foolishly sacrifice yourself, especially when it's a family member, especially if it's a husband or an adult child. Those are the hardest to do. All right, let me see if we have some questions here before we wrap up for today. I usually like to answer some questions. I have an addict in my family. My husband recently died. How do I let the addict know his inheritance is not coming until he's sober? I think you're just going to have to say it, that, hey, I love you. Your dad loved you. We want you to have some security in your life for an education or for retirement or whatever, but we're not giving you your inheritance because right now you're living foolishly and destructively, and we fear that this would go to alcohol or whatever. And so, you have a couple options here. You can put in a trust where there's a trustee who helps him with paying his rent or, those kind of things. Or you can say, my fear is he might get sober in order to get the inheritance and then have a big party. So I don't know what the inheritance is. So you might have to put it in a trust for him that he's not able to get it until he has 5 years of sobriety. That's documented, or was willing to take regular drug tests, or those kind of things, depending on his level of addiction. But it may be that you're concerned, like if it were me, I would be concerned for his ability to pay for his living expenses and pay for his, medical care and things like that. So I might just take the inheritance and put it in a trust for those things and earmark it and have a trustee. And that's the only things that get paid, and not anything else. All right. My abusive husband has enabled our younger daughter from childhood to abuse me, slap me, and fund her abuse by proxy while he pretends to be sweet. She's 28. He's not honest and has continued to live a deceitful and double life for 6.5 decades, living off of others, depleting my resources. And you've allowed this for 6 decades, right? So I think this is part of saying, What do I need to learn here about me? Now, when I stand up, so you're not learning, okay, good for you, and say no, the grown-up kid gaslights, abuses, and is willingly chosen to join him and create a false monster version of me. I'm continuing to stand up and say no. I don't respond to nasty, immature, abusive texts. Though many Christian friends want me to continue to love and enable, I say no. So this isn't really a question. This is a declaration. I say no. And I think it's really important that you not. So here's where I want you to look at your language. Though many Christian friends want me to continue to love, I say no. Okay, I want you to think about that. I want you to love. God wants you to love. And say no. And say no. Love says no. God says no to us sometimes. He always loves us. All right? So God doesn't want you to hate. And God doesn't want you to do it in the spirit of hatred or bitterness or resentment. This is where I think a lot of other leaders who are in this field of abuse literature get confused, especially when we're Christians. That Paul says something really important in Romans, and Jesus says something similar. He says, Paul says, do not be overcome by evil. So sometimes when we're at our limit, like we're right here, we're already drowning, and we finally say, enough, like you're at 6 decades of this is enough, I'm done. We have got so much anger toward them over what they've done to us, and even sometimes toward ourselves because of our passivity or our wrong teaching or the things that we didn't know before, all the things that come at us, that we can begin to hate him and her. So that would be Satan wins. Now he's got him, and now he's got your daughter, and now he's got you too. Even in your no, he's got you because it's a no with hate. And so I would just encourage you that Jesus tells us to love our enemies. What does that look like? It doesn't look like kissing an enemy. It doesn't look like living with an enemy. It doesn't look like sharing a bank account with an enemy, precisely because they're an enemy. But it's not just love a stranger, love an enemy. This is a person who has specifically harmed you. That's why they get the label enemy. How do we do that? Well, obviously with good boundaries, but it's mostly in here. Okay, it's mostly in here. So how do you learn to love your daughter and your husband and yourself? And part of it is having a strong no. I won't do that. I can't allow that. I won't be a part of that. Maybe you won't even be part of a conversation anymore because the conversation is so disrespectful towards you. So to prevent them from sinning against you and sinning themselves, you're just not going to be in their company. So that might be a loving thing to do. You can do the same things with different hearts. And so I just want to encourage you that the work that I see that might be possible for you right now is to have some really good boundaries. But make sure that you don't separate love from your no. It's love and no, not they're telling me to love and say yes. Love doesn't always say yes. And so you don't always have to say yes to them in order to love them. But make sure that Satan doesn't get a hold of your heart and turn you into someone hard-hearted with your no, right? And so that's the hard work of a Christian is how do I love my enemy? How can I pray for their salvation? How can I pray that? So sometimes for me, when I have an enemy, I pray that God would do whatever it takes to get their attention. You know, I pray that God would get their attention because they need God. They need love too. And they're all shriveled up in hatred and anger. But don't let yourself get that way too. That would be the only thing. You didn't really ask a question, but that would be the only piece that I noticed that might be a little bit, you're getting strong. And this is what happens. Women get strong and they get strong on their hatred, right? I don't want you to get strong on the back of hatred. I want you to get strong on the back of God. And God loves, and he's strong. He's stronger than hatred. He's stronger than the devil. I asked my husband, I'm going to get my glasses here. I asked my husband to go to counseling while we were on therapeutic separation. He said he'd go if I found him a counselor. I told him he was an adult, good girl, and he could find his own counselor. He's furious that I wouldn't do it for him since I want him to go. Should I have agreed to do that for him? I think you can change this question or this conversation with him. I think you could say, you know what, I was wrong. I would like you to go to counseling because I think you could benefit from it, and I think our marriage needs it for you to change. But what I'm hearing loud and clear is you don't really want to. You see, because if he finds his own counselor, this is what's going to happen. He's going to tell the counselor all the awful things you did. The counselor's not going to have the greatest perspective of things, and he's going to think that you're the abuser and that you're that he's enabling you. So it's just going to be reversed. So I don't think him finding his own counselor in the spirit that he's in right now is going to be helpful to your marriage at all. So I think a better approach for you is to say, I release you. You are totally free to be exactly the man you want to be. And then let him, and then watch to see who shows up. And that might be a man you can't live with, right? See, nobody changes, honestly. Ladies, nobody changes unless they want to. You don't change unless you want to, right? You're here because you want to be here. You're listening to me because you want to. You sought me out. No, even maybe somebody said, oh, go listen to this lady, and you did, and you liked me or you didn't like it, or you liked what we said or you didn't like what we said. When we find our husband the person to talk to, first of all, he doesn't want to. If he really wanted to find a good doctor, he'd find one, right? If he doesn't find one, he doesn't really want to. If he really wanted to learn golf, he'd find a YouTube channel. He'd find a golf pro. He'd find a buddy to help him. He would find what he wanted to learn. If someone doesn't want to learn healthy relationship skills, if they don't want to learn what's going on inside of them that drives them, if they don't want to learn what their triggers are and learn to control them, they're not going to learn. Even if they go to counseling, they're not going to learn. It's an expensive lesson of stupid tax, because the counselor can't change you. They can just teach you how to change. But if you don't want to change and you're not even presenting the right problem, if I go to the doctor and I don't tell them really what's really wrong, I tell them what I want them to think, they're not going to be able to prescribe the right medicine. And even if they prescribe the right medicine, I might not take it. So I would say, change your approach and say to your husband, you're free to be whoever you want to be. And then let me decide if I want to be married to that man. Right? Because you're not going to change him. Only he can change him. And he's saying to you really loud and clear, I don't really want to change. How do you convey to others who do not understand your divorce because it was a noble sacrifice to be safe? So let me change the question. Why do you need other people to understand? Right? Why do you need other people to understand? You understand. Hopefully your children understand. Why do you need other people to understand? This trips us up as women, and it trips us up from being healthy. Like, I want you guys to understand what I'm saying. I don't need you to. You can decide or not decide whether to believe what I'm saying or not believe what I'm saying. You can like me or not like me. I don't need you to like me. I'd love for you to like me, but I don't need for you to like me. And so I think this is something that we stay really immature and unhealthy when we need other people to approve of everything we do. Because then you're not free to do what you think to do. Like, well, is this okay? Is this okay? Do you like it? Are you okay with this? Am I okay? That's crazy making. So I would switch this question to ask you, why do you need their approval? Because you might not get it. And even if you had totally legitimate reasons for divorce in their mind, they still might not think that you made the right decision. They might say, well, yeah, he did commit adultery 50 times, but you still should forgive. You're not going to get 100% approval rating when you get divorced. And let me say it the other way. You're not going to get 100% approval rating if you choose not to get divorced. People are people. Even Jesus, who was perfect, didn't get 100% approval rating. And he was fine with that. So my question, I think, would be more productive to you is, why do you need their approval? That's the thing you need to work on. Not how do I convince them what I do is right, but why do I need to convince them of anything? Right? Okay. How do you not feel guilty for a son's children he will not take care of? He's an addict, has 3 sons with 3 different women. They need my help. I feel they need my help. I have lost contact with his first son. Yeah. I don't know how old the children are, but I think one of the things a healthy person does is they decide they have to learn what I'm responsible for and what I'm not responsible for. And you are not responsible for your adult son's choices, right? You're not even responsible for all your little kids' choices. Let me tell you a story. Okay, you've got 3 kids. And speaking of story, we have this workshop next Thursday. I totally forgot to talk about it. Change your story, change your life. If you want to start learning some of the tools I'm teaching you in all of these Facebook Lives about how do you think differently, like how do you ask yourself, why do I need their approval versus how do I get their approval? That's a very different question. It changes the story, doesn't it? So I'm going to do a workshop on December 5th, and I forgot all about talking about that. So let me just put the information up there. It's called Change Your Story, Change Your Life. And you can sign up for it. It's going to be a workshop offline on December 5th. And the link is leslievernick.com, join workshop. It's going to be an hour long of teaching. How do you begin to change your story? So let's tell the story now. So I have this son who has these children, all right, and I need to help them. That's your story. Maybe the story becomes, I have these children, and how do I pray for them? Because I can't help them, but God can help them. God can bring lots of people into their life to help them. And that might give you some relief from the guilt or the shame of, I raised a bad kid who now doesn't take care of his kids. Your kids have choices, even when they're little. So I was about to tell you the story. There's 3 children. You have 3 children. All of them want cookies. Mom, we're starving. We need cookies. Now you have dinner coming in 20 minutes. And you say, no, you may not have cookies because we're eating dinner in 20 minutes. That's what a good mom would say. She wouldn't give her kids cookies right before dinner, right? We can all agree on that. These kids are 5 years old. One kid says, okay, and walks away. Another kid says, you're such a mean mom. You don't care about us. You would rather us starve. Where'd that come from? And the third kid says nothing, but behind your back goes and steals the cookies. Who made them do that? You have 3 kids. They all made different choices about how they were going to handle your no. You can't control that. You can't control what's going on inside of them. Those are their decisions, even at 5. And all you can do is notice and begin to parent them so that they can learn that they have different choices, but you can't make them, even a 2-year-old. Hey, you're going to have to go to timeout till you calm down. And some calm down in 10 minutes, some calm down in 2 minutes, some calm down in 2 hours. They don't calm down. They're banging the walls and putting holes in the doors. How do you control that? So first of all, I'd really like you to take the guilt trip off yourself for how your son has turned out. There have been children who have been raised by horrible parents and turned out pretty well, right? So you're not 100% responsible for how your children, you were 100% responsible for the kind of mom you were. So you look at that and ask yourself, was I a good mom? Did I, not perfect, but did I do my best by my children? I can't control all their choices. Even at 5, I can't control all their choices. That leads to a very different story than you're writing right now. It's, oh, my fault. I raised a child who doesn't take care of his children. Now I feel so guilty and I've got to come in and rescue them. You don't have to do that. Now, I understand they're grandkids. You would want to help them. So I'm not minimizing that. But you don't have to take that guilt trip that you're tempted to take. So that would be step number 1. Step number 2 is, do you have contact with these children's mothers? I assume they have mothers and their mothers are taking care of them because he's not being a responsible dad. So there might be ways that you can establish a relationship as a grandmother with these mothers. I'm sure as a single mom, they might welcome some hands-on help, some financial help, whatever, if you have that to offer. And that would be a noble sacrifice to say, hey, I really want to be in these children's lives. I'm so sorry for the way my son is parenting. He's not healthy, and I can't be their dad, but I can certainly be their grandma and would love to do that. And in some ways. And so you could reach out to see if that's possible, but you can't fix this situation because it's not yours to fix. So many of us try to fix our husband. Our husband is not ours to fix. We're responsible to love him. We can't fix him. He has to fix him. He has to fix him. You can't fix your son. He has to fix himself, right? And so I think it's really important to stay in our lane and know our place. We can love someone. We can offer help. We can't fix them, right? Even if you loved your husband and he was a diabetic and you said, I'm going to cook all the right food for you. I'm only going to shop for healthy foods. And he goes off and sneaks and drinks beer and eats Doritos at the bar with the guys. And you have no control over that. And he has a diabetic problem because he doesn't check his insulin. You can't fix him. He has to fix him. He has to steward him. So your job is to be responsible for you and care about people, but not be responsible for them. Sometimes we're responsible to people, to be honest, to be faithful, but we're not responsible for them, including our children and as they grow up. So I hope that's helpful for you. How do I not feel guilty about not letting my alcoholic husband, attend the holidays? I assume he's not your husband. You're separated from him? I mean, if I allow him to come, there's always drama. The kids will not come if I allow him to come. So I assume he's an ex-husband, or you're separated from him. He's not living in your house, because if he's living in your house, that's not yours to do, to not let him come. I think you can be kind with the truth, right? Truth is always kind and clear. I said truth sometimes can be harsh. It's not always kind, but faithful are the wounds of a friend. Okay, faithful are the wounds of a friend. Lying to someone isn't helpful. So I think honestly, you can say to your husband, I would love it if you could come to Thanksgiving with our family. I would love for our family to be different than it is. But I'm living in truth and reality these days. And your drinking problem has cost so many holidays and so much drama in our family that I'm not willing to risk that again. So I'd be happy to save you some leftovers and you can pick them up later. I'd be happy to go out to dinner with you tomorrow afternoon after Thanksgiving and let you know how things went. However you want to do that, you can decide, or maybe not. Maybe the leftovers is as much as you're going to do, but you can't come because the children have told me very clearly that they're not willing to go through another Thanksgiving with your drinking problem, and you're still drinking. And so we're not willing to risk that. That's a hard no. And you don't have to feel guilty for letting him experience the consequences of his choices. His choices is, I love alcohol more than anything else, and I'm not willing to stop. And his choices affect your choices, right? So if my husband says, hey, I love losing my temper and screaming and beating you up with my words more than anything else, and so I'm not changing, I'm going to say, I got it, and I'm not living here, right? Those are your choices. These are my choices. And I don't need to feel guilty because I'm not willing to sacrifice everybody's Thanksgiving for you to be here and ruin it for us all. Why would you do that? So I really encourage you to ask yourself, where is the guilt coming from? I suspect it's not guilt. I suspect it's fear. Fear of his disapproval, fear of his disappointment, fear of his, anger. I suspect it's more of that. I don't think you would genuinely feel I'm supposed to invite him to come and ruin another Thanksgiving. I don't think you really believe that. Usually guilt comes when we violated something that we hold as a conviction. So do a little work with yourself around that. Is it really guilt or is it something else? And then offer what you can in generosity and love with good boundaries. I think it's really important to protect Thanksgiving for everybody else. All right. Where are we at time? Okay. I recently went through my husband's phone and found texts. I don't know, they took my glasses. We're there. I recently went through my husband's phone and found texts that were to another woman. He assured me there's nothing to worry about, but he also says this is the question of loyalty or something he doesn't think he can come back from. How long do I wait for him to decide we're separate? So he also says that this question of his loyalty is something he doesn't think he can come back from. How long do I wait for him to decide we are separated? I'm not sure what you mean by loyalty or what he means by loyalty, that maybe he can't come back to being the kind of loyal husband that you want. So I would say this to everyone who's separated or who's struggling in a marriage. When you try to make him be the person you want him to be, just like if he tries to make you be the person he wants you to be, like Betty Crocker and Victoria's Secret all rolled up in one, you can't sustain it. And you might not even be happy being that kind of person. You don't want to be that kind of person, right? God didn't make you to be that kind of person. So the best advice I could give for all of you who are in this dilemma is let your husband be who he wants to be, and then believe him. And then you can decide whether you can partner with that person or not, right? So perhaps you can't trust him, and being separated is showing you that. And he's saying, I'm not sure I can ever, be a one-man woman again or want to, and believe him. Believe him. So I think we've made an idol of marriage. In this, the scriptures do not make marriage an idolatry any more than it made the Sabbath an idolatry, and the Pharisees made an idol of the Sabbath. We've got to make all these rules around it. Divorce is not God's best for any marriage, for sure, for sure. But sometimes we're foolishly trying to save something that's already dead. And I don't know that this marriage is dead, but I think your husband is saying it's dying, and I'm not sure I want to revive it. And maybe that's true. And so you might have to listen harder, ask some other questions. Okay. If you haven't signed up for the workshop yet, I would really encourage you to go to leslievernick.com/join workshop. It's going to be amazing. I'm going to give you all kinds of illustrations. A lot of people give me feedback on how my illustrations are so practical and relatable of how you can understand how to do the next right thing. I'm going to give you 3 specific things that you can do starting December 6th, the next day after the workshop, that you can begin to change your life story, because you're the main character in your story. And how you handle things, just like we're talking about, if you make your husband do something, your story is going to turn out one way. If you don't make him do something, it's going to turn out another way. And you don't know which is going to be, but sometimes we cling to, this is the way I want it to go, so I have to force the round peg through the square hole, and it just makes a mess. It doesn't work. And so I'm going to teach you how you can begin to change your story and change your life, and to begin to create the kind of life that brings meaning and purpose to you. Even in the hard, we're not erasing hard. Hard is still there, but you're the character in your story. There's always bad guys in a story. There's always hard in every story, right? Every story that we love, it's got hard in it. But how you do hard matters. It matters in the way the story goes. Think of any movie and the character. If they just sat in bed all day and cried, they wouldn't make that story a good story, would they? And so we've got to figure out how to do hard and how to get through hard as the character in our story. And so it's not going to be on Facebook. It's not going to be on social media at all, so that you can have total privacy to share your story a little bit if you want to in the chat and ask questions. So the webinar itself will last about 50 minutes. Then we'll do about an hour and 15, 20 minutes of questions to answer all your questions that you have about it. Okay, so I really hope you show up. It's going to be excellent. If you've been to other webinars before, you know that they're good. They're full of content. And we really, my desire as a legacy is to help Christian women get healthy and strong, so that they can have healthy and strong children and healthy, strong relationships, which is God's will for you. All right. So let me see if there's time for one more question. While I'm looking for one more question, could you please write what your takeaway from today is? What is one thing that you got? Like, I see some. Yeah. Not to sacrifice to any other people's bad behavior, for sure. Not to sacrifice to any other people's bad behavior. And we'll be back on Monday talking about what's the difference between intuition and discernment. It's kind of a tricky thing. So we'll talk about that. All right. Here's a question from a man. My wife and I got in a fight, and she called the law on me. Now she has a 2-year restraining order, but she keeps trying to contact me. I'm super confused. Divorce time, I need help, not sure what to do. Well, if you've got a 2-year restraining order, there are some things that you did that you're not telling me, right? So that's a pretty long restraining order. And she might be trying to contact you because in her own fear and unhealthiness or loneliness, those kind of things, she might be doing things that are wrong, and don't contact her. But I can see where you're confused. I don't know that it's divorce time. I need help. So I would really encourage you to, if you're a Christian man, you might want to contact Chris Moles, Reverend Chris Moles. He has a Man of Peace curriculum for men who have been abusive. Now, if you were physically violent, he won't take you. You should also go for some help for yourself. Like, why is it that you act that way when you get upset? She doesn't make you. She doesn't make you. All right. You decide that I'm going to hurt her. And obviously you did some harmful things, or you wouldn't have gotten a 2-year restraining order. So I would really encourage you to stop focusing on your marriage right now. Stop focusing on her and do your own work. If you do want to change, then find someone who can help abusive men change. And there are some programs out there that do that. Even court ordered. I'm surprised you weren't put in a court ordered program, but I would encourage you to go into a program to understand your emotions and how to regulate your emotions and how to control your hands and your tongue when you get upset, because obviously you don't know how to do that very well. All right. Thanks for showing up though. And thanks for asking. So we are at 11 o'clock. I've got stuff to do to prepare for Thanksgiving, as I'm sure you do too. We're going to take tomorrow off because most of us are going to be doing something around that day. And we will see you Monday after everybody's done their eating and their shopping. And hopefully you'll be back ready to learn. On Monday, we're going to be doing this Facebook Live on intuition or discernment. And then we're going to get ready for our workshop December 5th on Thursday. So if you haven't signed up yet, please sign up and feel free to invite a friend. It's at lesliebernick.com/join workshop. All right. Take care. God bless. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Bye-bye.